It's rated R. It's from 1993. It's a crime drama. It runs at 2 hours and 1 minute, and it's got a 97.
Jeez. It went up 4 points.
Got a 97 on Rotten. It's directed by Robert De Niro and starring Chaz Palminteri, Lilo Brancato, Catherine Narducci, Francis Capra, Terrell Hicks, and Robert De Niro, obviously. The film follows the life of young Colegio, growing up in the Bronx during the 60s and trying to navigate between his strict father's moral compass and the temptation of easy money with the local crime boss. The origins of how this tale came to be are very interesting, and the concept was at first a one-man Broadway play created by the incredible Chaz Palminteri. After De Niro attended the play one night in 1990, he met with Chaz to pitch him the idea of turning his show into a full-blown film, an idea that Chaz would soon accept under the terms that most of the playwright would stay as is, and he could star as the film's main gangster, Sonny. De Niro also had his restrictions, as he not only wanted to portray Colegio's father, but also have this be his directorial debut. The two struck a deal and wrote the screenplay together. The film itself was released on September 29th, 1993, but by De Niro's Tribeca Productions and Savoy Pictures. Although the film struck a nerve with critics who praised the performances and direction, the film didn't do big box office numbers. With a budget of $10 million, it pulled in just about 17.3 altogether. It's a wonder how this film seems to be less talked about than others within its gangster subgenre, as it is just as good as any of them, in my humble opinion at least. A Bronx Tale has it all. It's an incredibly authentic feeling coming-of-age flick, with De Niro playing against type at the time and also being behind the camera as well. It's also impossible to forget Chaz Palminteri as Sonny, a dangerous mafia boss who you also can't help but love with his smooth and immeasurable charm. It's no surprise this film would later jumpstart Chaz's acting career in Hollywood. Our main character, who comes to be known as C, is depicted by two different actors, which is always a risk if they aren't on the same skill bracket. But Francis Capra really sets the tone and brings some intense angsty energy to his role, and then when we, the audience, are hit with the fast-forward button 8 years later, Lilo Brancato Jr. does not disappoint as he struggles with deep-rooted social issues and romance. We also have to point out the details that make this picture feel, very authentic, with its beautiful music choices, building structures, cars, and fashion sense. If you haven't seen this film yet, please check it out. You won't regret it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Very nice.
Forget about it.
So, like we start to show off all the time, or at least this segment, Atlas, what made you pick A Bronx Tale this week, and what is your attachment to it? Do you remember the first time that you saw this film?
I do. So, Bronx Tale came out in 93. I probably didn't watch it until 96, 97. And this was during a time where I was probably a freshman, sophomore in high school. So I would be, like in my prime teenage years. We had like that illegal cable box. So I would watch Cinemax, HBO, and I remember it coming on a few different times where they play the same movie kind of like a lot during that month. Watching it and actually just kind of just falling for the character of C, just kind of relating to him being in the city, growing up around kind of like a mob or gangster mentality, having someone that he kind of looks up to that's completely 100% different from his real father. How he kind of got two educations. I didn't want to say like kind of like how they say in what's that one movie that we just did? Buster Scruggs. Everyone wants to relate to somebody in the movie or the story.
Okay.
I totally just saw myself as C. Even fast forwarding to, the 8 years later or 10 years later when he's already grown up and stuff. Was it 8 years later? 8 years later.
7 or 8.
7 or 8. So he's already like 18. So I just feel the first time I seen this movie, I actually had already seen Goodfellas before this movie, off and on. My parents, my mom, and my stepdad were always playing movies where I would walk in and it was already on, so I would just sit down and watch it. And it was usually after like baseball games and shit, so they would just put movies on during a barbecue. But this was like one of those movies that my stepdad for sure would watch all the time. I've probably seen this movie close to maybe 10 or 15 times at least, like all the way through, not counting times where I just watched like 10, 15, clips. 20 minutes. Yeah. Clips of it for sure. I really loved Sonny's character, even though he was a bad guy, he was kind of teaching the kid, to be good no matter what. Like,
don't be like him.
Yeah, like I do this, because this is my life. It's not for you. Like, I do this because I have to, pretty much.
I think he, in the back of his head, he saw the potential that C had.
Yeah.
To rise above that mentality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And he's seen it as trying to teach this kid who knew he was already street smart, first of all. By not, we'll get into it, but he was already street smart, so he felt like he had, like you said, the potential to be somebody and, to do good instead of being...
Not a criminal.
Yeah.
And, in short.
In his life,
Yeah.
Don't do this. This is my life. Do something different.
Yeah.
Do you, see? You're going to have to do something about your name. It's too big.
And he's like, well, that's some name.
Yeah. What do your friends call you?
Cologero.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
And then also, I specifically remember as a teenager seeing this kid and saying, dude, that's the kid from Shazam. Or fucking...
It is.
Yeah. Kazam, dude. Yeah, with Shaq. And he's like... His name was Max in the movie. He's like, what are we, Max? And he's like, we're genies. I remember that little kid from that shit. So when I seen him in this gangster ass... I never knew Robert De Niro made this movie until years later, And when I put 2 and 2 together, I was like, it fucking makes sense. It's really, really good. I really liked the transition, like you said, of having the young kid in the beginning of the movie growing up, but those two kids look like each other,
Yeah, so the transition, it doesn't hurt the film.
Not at all. It goes smooth,
Yes.
Like you almost like you're seeing the kid grow up, like right then and there, like So I really liked the fact that this movie was a timepiece. Like that was one of my main, one of the main points where I kind of judge a movie on is that if it's a timepiece, it has to be super accurate, meaning the clothes, the cars, the music, especially the music. I've always loved that this movie had this really good soundtrack. Look at the way I count threes, dude. But yeah, to me, it was one of those iconic movies where not only it was a gangster movie, but it was a coming-of-age teenage movie where it was about this boy and his friends, and they were trying to be fuck-ups, and he's trying to do the good thing. He's trying to be good, and he has these people, telling him he has potential to do shit. But growing up, this is just one story in the Bronx. Straight up, this is just one story.
Yep.
So, to me, it just always struck a nerve with me. Just seeing this, this story. I love the story, everything about it, even down to the racial points of view, where it shows the struggle between you wanting to, kind of when he says, about hooking up with the black chick. That shit was super taboo during the 90s, and it was always frowned upon no matter what.
Well, even back in because you said it's a timepiece in the 60s.
Oh, yeah, in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah. It's just interracial dating was not really a thing, or it was looked at like it wasn't accepted back then the way it is now.
Yeah, and this was one of the things that I was trying to point out too, is it was made in 93, so it was right after like one of the highest peaks of racial tension in America after the riots, Rodney King riots. So you can kind of like almost see like it was like that, that hidden undertone message of, hey, racism was back then and racism is now, and it sucks, but that was one of the many things that C had to deal with growing up, and it was even worse for him because he really liked Jane. It was an interracial couple that he just was like, fuck it, I'm gonna do it anyways. What are you looking at? Go back in your house, you.
Mind your business.
Mind your business. But yeah, I just really loved this movie as a teenager. Loved this movie as a... What'd you say? I'm a grown-ass man, 38 years old. I can do whatever the fuck I want. And I don't know. I just feel like if it's a timeless piece because, unfortunately, America's still like that. Like everywhere. Probably even worse. In some parts of the boroughs. And that was another thing, too. It's really, as a California kid growing up, you can relate to this Bronx Tale being told from a New Yorker's point of view. I never even thought about that till now. It's relatable on on a global scale. That's why I think this movie blew up after it came out. Because people weren't really, probably hip to what it was really about. But to me, I just think it's like a really good story about a kid growing up in the Bronx.
Yeah, and having these kind of, how do you say, like...
Jimmy the Cricket situations where he doesn't know about what to do. Like, I wish I had a conscience. And Sonny's like his conscience.
Some of the parts he even says, like, when he's in the car with his friends with the Molotov cocktails, he's like, I can hear my dad screaming at me now to get out.
Yep.
But in my head, I can't. What am I going to do? They're going to call me a chicken shit, a pussy or whatever for leaving before we even do anything.
Yep. And then he's like, I can hear Sonny saying, hold your head, C. Be strong, C. Don't back down, C.
The saddest thing in life is wasted talent, fool.
Yep, that's what he says, dude. And that was one of the morals that stuck with me from that movie, because a lot of people who've seen that movie would always say that. It was notorious for that. Sonny always said the saddest thing in life was wasted talent. So you kind of... It was kind of like a YOLO, You gotta do what you're good at. Everybody's good at something. You either you suck at everything, or you're good at something, And that's what Sonny was trying to tell you. Like, hey, I do this because I'm good at this. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I do what I do because I have to. Like, this is my life. This isn't your life.
So he's trying to say, like, yo, you have talent or potential to do something else.
Yeah.
And even Lorenzo and his mom, they saw that the kid had talent. He did good in school. He was very charismatic. If he can hang around, even after he started making money, if you can hang around and with the big boys like that, because of course you were Sonny's kid, but still, you have to have some sort of oomph to stick around, And he liked it. And he was making $600. He had $600, which is equivalent to, I think, $8,000 back then. I remember reading that.
He's like, "What'd you do? Become a lawyer overnight?"
No, he said, "Would you become a brain surgeon overnight?" He's on, tell me everything. I won't get mad.
When he's like, there's a problem when your son has a bigger bank account than you do.
Yeah, I offered you a job, but you said you didn't want to.
He's like, yeah.
And I'm saying no now, Sonny.
Stay away from my son.
Hey!
But I like when Lorenzo, he knows he's on thin ice because he's like, I know who you